Hey, good morning. Yes, it is. It is Sunday, February 9th. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to work on some more with personal development of who we are and the people that are around us. And sometimes we can't fix everything, and maybe by fixing, we're not doing a bit of good for the other person. Stay tuned. Alrighty, welcome back. My name is Eric, if you didn't already know it, and this is the weekend. Today is Sunday, February 9th, and we're going to be talking about when it's time to be involved and when it's time to pull back. And a lot of times that fine line gets mixed. And where I'm going with this is it could be someone that has a drinking problem, maybe using drugs, or puts themselves in bad situations all the time, looking for someone else to bail them out. And that could be you, could be someone you love. I know in my case, I'm not a hypocrite. I had a drinking problem in my younger years. Johnny Walker Red and Black, nothing but the top shelf for me. But when I got up in the morning, I had to take a shot just to keep going. And when I got home from work, I'd take a drinking glass and fill it with just straight without, and then chase it with water. And then stay in that drunken state until I went to bed. Not proud of those times, but it's another scar that I have that I figured out and I left behind. It says a lot about a person about what they've overcome. Some people never get close enough to the edge to learn a lot of these lessons, and that's great. If you were smart enough in the beginning not to get near it. But, you know, I can remember when I was involved with a mining accident. I became a drug addict, but a prescribed drug addict, because they were giving me as much hydrocodone as I wanted. And it went from using it to quell the pain to another addiction type thing. And like alcohol, I just decided one day enough was enough. That I can't keep doing what I'm doing, or I'm going to fall off the deep end. Now, I don't recommend, if you have a heavy drinking problem, to quit cold turkey. Because I'll tell you, I had the shakes, the sweats. I thought I was going to die. And you can die from stopping drugs or alcohol very quickly. And I would suggest that you do it in a setting. They have hospitals that are set up to detox you, to bring you down slow. And be there so if your heart stops, which you could. But I did the same thing with the prescribed drug addict. Said enough was enough. I'm not letting it run my life. And I quit. Somebody else didn't make me quit. I quit. And that's the key right there, is as much as you love someone, trying to get them to quit, it's not going to happen. Because what ends up happening, and it's by no choice of their own other than starting that down that pathway, that the drug or the alcohol becomes more important than the loved ones in their lives, in our lives. And it did. That's one of the reasons that I quit, the hard stuff, alcohol. I quit doing drugs, prescribed drugs. Was I was making bad choices when it came to what was important in life. Was it my kids and my wife, or was it the alcohol and the drugs? And my wife used to find excuses. Love, bless her heart. But it wasn't doing anything for me by having someone find excuses for my behavior. I'm not proud of those times, other than I decided enough was enough. See, you start down that path, and they say some people have addictive behaviors, and that somehow it's inherited. That's a cop out. That's just saying, there's my excuse. That's why I'm drinking, because it runs in the family. No, you can change the tide at any time if you choose to. If you're somebody that goes out and has a good time on the weekend with friends and you're sober the rest of the time, as long as it's not putting yourself in a situation where you're choosing it over your loved ones. Going out with the guys every weekend and getting smashed while the wife and the kids sit at home wondering if you're going to make it home is not a good decision. And it's not just the guy. I've seen a lot of people, females, that were into drugs and alcohol. Actually, we had a neighbor that if he didn't bring a 12-pack home with him from work, he wouldn't go inside the house. Because she was like a Tasmanian devil. She wanted her beer, and she wanted it then. He was feeding her addiction. He was doing what most people will do, and that is, it's easier to give them the frickin' beer than it is to deal with them. And we do that in life. We enable people. It's a common trait of people that want to do good for others. But we also have to understand that there's a fine line too, again, of where you're helping someone to where you're enabling someone. And I've got a string of different things in my life where I was enabling somebody else's behavior. And one of the biggest ones, I'll be honest with you, is my wife. Just recently, she had a fall up at, a hospital, and they did an x-ray of her hip, and they found a very fine hairline crack. Nothing to be concerned about, but it was there. And should she have the surgery? Now, up until then, she was walking fine. So I told them, go ahead, while she was right there, get the surgery done, out of the way. She's not getting any younger, right? All right. So fast forward that to 3 weeks later, and she's still unwilling to put weight on that hip. She didn't have hip replacement. She had a screw put in her hip. 2 screws. And she carried that on to home, where at first I could get her to walk so far with the walker, but she decided she had to be in a wheelchair. And instead of saying no and pointing out, it was easier to deal with her, just let her sit in a wheelchair and do her thing, than it was to have to deal with her. So yeah, we do have enabling qualities within us that we have to be careful of. But a lot of times what ends up happening with the drugs and the alcohol, or putting themselves in bad relationships or in bad situations, and us coming to the rescue, is not doing them a bit of good. They need to find their own way out. And sometimes, as much as you love someone, You need to step back and let them implode. Explode, but implode. They need to find their bottom. All right? And if you're saving that person all the time before they hit that bottom, they're not getting the full brunt, the full force of their actions. Now, I'm not saying to let someone die, and not even close. But people need to figure out how to get out of that situation so that they don't do it again. And understand that it's a bad situation. You know, I've seen kids in our area that any other time they would be the greatest kids you'd ever meet. But they got hooked on to crack. That's the big thing up here now, crack. People are making it in houses in the smaller cities. They call them crack houses, where they're boiling, I don't even know, some kind of recipe that they can make right on the stove. But it took those really great kids and turned them into somebody unrecognizable. They were out stealing to feed that habit of needing more crack. They were willing to do anything to get money to feed their habit. I don't see so much the drinking with the younger kids, but the drugs. You know, as much as you tell them to stay away from it, we didn't have, I guess we did. When I was growing up, I was just, my parents were part of the hippie generation, but they weren't hippies. My dad was a serviceman with the Army, and my mother was a registered nurse. But their generation was also the ones that were in Washington with these big flower powers and all the other stuff. They had LSD, they had acid and all that. So I guess it's been around, just different drugs, right? Different outs. But I remember when I was growing up, the strongest thing we had in town was beer, liquor, and weed. Marijuana. That was the big ones. And I can remember still in high school drinking a beer with a straw because we couldn't afford too many beers. But I guess what I'm trying to get across is sometimes we have to let people fail. No matter how much we love them, by trying to fix them, we're not really fixing them. We're actually doing more damage. And it's really hard if it's one of your kids. You don't want them to go hungry. If they're out on the street and they're trying to find money to continue their habit, the last thing you want to do, even though every part of your body is going to cry for you to do it, is to give that child money. If you're worried that the child needs something to eat, make them a meal. But don't give them the money to go buy more drugs. I mean, you watch these shows like Dr. Phil and about these drug and alcohol treatment programs. I'm a firm believer that not until that person decides they want to quit, will they quit. Nobody else on God's green earth is going to convince them otherwise. So the quicker you let them find their bottom, the better off it is for them. Because when you hit bottom, there's no further to fall. You've lost everything. Your relationships, financial, everything is gone. You've put yourself there. Nobody else did. And if you're on the other side of the fence and you're dealing with someone like that, you didn't put them there. They did. And they need to figure out and find solutions of how to get better. Because if they can find that solution and draw on those reasons why it's better to stay clean and sober than it is to do drugs and alcohol, they have worked at the process to fix themselves. They know how to fix themselves. And they know what they had to go through to fix themselves to quit drinking or using drugs. For some, it's being locked up in jail, where they don't have access to that. But I've seen rich kids and even poor kids that went to rehab only to go to rehab again over and over and over because the parents want to have them fix the problem. And they're not ready to be fixed. And all you're doing is just causing more frustration for yourself. And we're not just talking about drugs and alcohol. We're talking about people putting themselves in bad situations. The worst, I think, out there of situations is where you have an abuser and an abusee. And a lot of times in those instances, and a lot of times it's the female that's being abused, all right? And she will defend the abuser because she has very little self-worth. She feels that if she can change and do something different, that will change the behavior of the abuser. When in fact, I don't care who you are and what reasons you have, you never lay a hand on another person unless it's self-defense. And you never, as a guy, hurt, slap, punch a female. Never. There should be never any instance. If the female is the abuser, get the hell out. All I can tell you is walk as fast as you can the other direction. But so many of us have seen the stereotypical of the woman getting abused, right? But I've seen it the other way too. So it does happen both directions. But when we try to step in and save the situation of getting in between the abuser and the abusee, then you get shit on because you are the bad person. And the two of them make up for the short period of time until they start fighting again. And I've seen guys, and there's not one excuse in this world for touching a lady or a girl, that she will get them riled up to the point of where they just become someone else. But if you lay a hand on a woman, a girl, you've crossed that line. You need to get the hell out of that relationship now. But when we step in and try to solve the problem, we're not doing anything to help what's going on, are we? Because if anything, we're pushing the abused back into the abuser's arm, and we can't figure out why. It's because the abused is still feeling that it's something they're doing that's causing it. And they may very well be doing it that's causing it. But no one should be in a situation of where it goes from words to physical. And I'm saying before it goes to physical, thank God I've never been that way. Get the hell out. And if you're a loved one, all I can tell you is you can tell the abuser you're crossing that line. If you're another guy, you can threaten that person. That usually never works, but if you can get it across to the abuser that they are crossing a line, or the abusee that they're causing the situation to escalate. And there are times where the abused is doing nothing but the abuser is drinking and doing drugs. We don't want to teach our boys that it's okay to hit someone else. We don't. I'm not saying raise a bunch of wussies, but I'm just saying a well-rounded individual is the way to go. But a lot of times when we don't, if we're getting ourselves involved, we're also enabling people to do stuff. We're finding excuses for them, right? And we can go back to my wife with the hip surgery and deciding being in a wheelchair. She got to the point of where she was sleeping on the couch, had a commode in the living room, and the remote with a big flat screen TV, and she was in seventh heaven. And people ask, why would you even allow that? And the reason was, it was easier just to let her do her thing than it was to argue with her. And that's not a good reason. But understand your position and where you're at. If you're the one that's drinking and it's becoming destructive behavior in your life, only you can decide to stop. If you're using drugs, again, only you can decide to stop. If you're the abused in a relationship, leave. If you're the abuser in a relationship, leave. If you're the one that's trying to help the person with drinking, drugs, or an abusive relationship, understand that you can't fix them. You can't fix the situation other than maybe calling law enforcement and having one of them locked up. But in that abusive type thing. It's funny when we talk about my wife, because my brother-in-law, about the same time, was having problems even trying to walk with the walker, so much pain. And he went and had both his hips replaced. And within a week and a half was walking without a walker. And to him, he was pain-free. I mean, he had pain, but not anywhere near what he had before. And then I look at my wife with a hairline and 2 pins and being stuck in a wheelchair. Oxymoron, right? But I'm going to start wrapping this up. For the other guys with my eye, you've noticed the last couple of days, if you've been watching the videos, that one of the blood vessels in my eye burst. And I can only think that it must have been a blood pressure spike. But every time I check my blood pressure, it's good. It's down like 90 over 60. So I run low, but there must have been a spike that something took place. But I'll bring that to my doctor's attention tomorrow and see what she says. So on that note, you guys have a great day. Don't enable people and don't give them ways out. Let them find their own bottom. So on that note, you guys have a great Sunday. We'll see you here bright and early tomorrow morning for Monday.